Formula One had one of the most chaotic, controversial, and talked about race weekends in years, and I am not sure if it was amazing or a disaster. Let me break it down for you. Que lo que, mi gente? Welcome to the Monoplaza F1 podcast. As always, I'm your host, Emi Vertre, and we are going to be covering the Australian GP. It's the first race of the 2026 season. New regulations, new complaints, new standards, new everything. I'm going to be talking about a lot of things. Is Mercedes already running away with it? Are the new regulations already broken? And what on earth happened to my boy, Oscar Piastri? So yeah, stick around. It's going to be a short one, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, this wasn't just a race. This was the first Formula One race under the biggest regulation change in the sport's history. And things went sideways almost immediately. So, of course, just a brief explainer on the 2026 new regulations. The cars are now smaller. They're lighter. They are narrower. So new chassis, new power units. And as you probably already heard, there's a 50-50 split between the combustion and the electric power. It's leading to maybe slower speeds than people are used to, a lot of energy harvesting. I'm sure you guys are probably already tired about hearing the phrase super clipping, which of course it's energy harvesting, which slows cars dramatically mid-straight. And the chief complaint, honestly, from the drivers is that, hey, it's not as fast, it's not as fun to drive, slowing down on corners when really you should be able to take it at full speed. Famously, you have Alonso saying during the Bahrain test that, hey, these cars are so, I don't know if technologically sound was the word that I would use, but these cars are so advanced that even a chef could drive it. I don't know about Aston Martin's car, but for sure, a chef could probably drive their car. And of course, we did have a significant historical precedent set on this grid. For the first time in about 10 years, we had more than 10 teams on the grid. So shouts out to Cadillac, my new favorite American-based team. We also had Ford returning after a 20-year absence. Obviously, they're going to be supplying Red Bull and Racing Bulls, and Audi making their official debut. Obviously, they took over for Sauber yesterday. This year they took over for Sauber, but it's a new engine, complete Audi engine, and it is also a new team, technically speaking, right? So definitely a lot to cover during this, right? But let's start briefly with the qualifying, just so that we get it started. Qualifying, honestly, was a mess, not necessarily in a good way. You had a four-time world champion who crashed out in Q1, a rookie that nearly ended his debut before it started, and the fastest lap was almost a full second quicker than anyone else. And here is how that unfolded. So obviously, we expected Mercedes to be the fastest team. That's been the thing that people have known about before these regs even started. And we had kind of been suspecting that they had been sandbagging this whole time. So it was a surprise to no one when Russell basically stormed to pole. It wasn't even close. His final lap was around 0.8 seconds clear of the next non-Mercedes car. So it's a pretty staggering gap. Of course, the bigger story was Verstappen not even making it into Q2. He had a lock in his rear axle, which again, it was a direct consequence of energy regeneration, and he crashed out. So you saw Verstappen, Sainz, and Stroll, who all failed to set a time during Q1, but obviously they had gotten enough FP or free practice time that they were able to compete. What the Verstappen crash did was allow Antonelli to bounce back because he had a heavy crash in FP3. Verstappen's crash in the red flag consequently allowed the Mercedes mechanics to be able to repair Antonelli's car, and ultimately he was able to put that thing on P2 behind his teammate. Now, when you talk about the new cars and how they're driving, you've been hearing a lot of complaints. You have the current world champion, Lando Norris, who was basically quoted. They asked him like, hey, is there anything you enjoy about these new regs? My man looked at the floor for about 7 seconds and was like, no, not really. And that would kind of be the theme with some of the more seasoned driver. But qualifying was crazy. The grid was set with you had obviously Russell in P1, Antonelli P2, and the surprise for me, although not really, was Hadjar with Leclerc P4, Piastri P5. Then you had Norris P6, Hamilton P7, Lawson, Lindblad, and Bortoleto closing out the top 10. So obviously, as you start to get into the race, you had a bunch of drama. Basically, the race hadn't even started, and yet we already had our first retirement of 2026, which was Oscar Piastri in his home Grand Prix. He never made it to the grid. I can't think of a more infuriating and embarrassing way to crash out of your home Grand Prix. So essentially what happened, because a lot of you are probably questioning, Piastri crashed exiting turn 4 on his outlap to the grid after experiencing a 100 kilowatt power surge. It was not expected. Obviously, the car snapped so fast that he basically was backwards before he even had a chance to react. Hulkenberg also did not make it to the start of the race, had to be wheeled off due to technical issues. So right off the jump, we start with 20 of 22 cars. Also, we had a new starting procedure because of the lack of the MGUH, where we get now 5-second warning via blue flashing lights before the start of the actual race. The only cars who really didn't struggle with this for sure, and it's probably going to be the case for the bulk of the year until other teams kind of catch up, were Mercedes, who had a crazy start. But yeah, you got the blue flashing lights as a new procedure. And then you got the 5 red lights. And really, honestly, it was kind of like 4 flashing red lights and then like a whisper of the 5th lights. And before we knew it, like the cars were off and running, right? And so the first 10 laps, honestly, of the race, it was chaos. The first 10 laps of this race were unlike anything I've seen in years. We had 7 lead changes. We had Ferraris flying. We had Russell and Leclerc swapping positions every single lap. This was F1 at its absolute wildest, right? So we take off and immediately we see Leclerc surge from P4 to the lead at turn 1 on lap 1. His teammate Lewis Hamilton also went from 7th to 5th by the end of lap 1. And essentially what we were treated to was Russell and Leclerc trading laps or leads repeatedly across the opening 9 laps. Those first 10 laps were amazing. And you kind of saw F1's new energy deployment, overtake mode, play out live for the first time. I'm not going to lie to y'all. When I saw it, I was like, oh man, whew, this is wild. Forget the ground effect rules. This is probably like the most exciting thing I've seen in a long time. But that kind of does open up a little bit of a debate for me, to be completely honest. Was this race exciting, or was it mostly battery management theater, right? On one side, you had Ferrari, Vasseur specifically saying, hey, I'm not sure if that I saw something like this in the last 10 years. Okay, super exciting. On the flip side, you had his driver Leclerc saying, you don't know when your battery will cut on the straight. So while defending, there are massive speed differences, and it was quite challenging. Again, the biggest issue with this set of regulations from the fans' perspective is that all of the overtakes seem a little bit artificial, right? You have an issue, and we'll get into it later. You have an issue where essentially our drivers taking the lead because they made gutsy moves on corners. Their car was faster. They did some crazy maneuvering and were able to deke and dupe and dive and deceive their opponents into making mistakes so that they could overtake it. You did see some of that, but by and large, as much as I like the overtakes in those first opening laps, it became apparent fairly quickly that at least some of these, if not a lot of these, were due to the massive change in batteries. So one driver would attack with overtake mode, then they would deplete their battery. And so as soon as their battery was depleted, all of a sudden their speed would cut off. And then the other driver would be able to take control and take the lead back. You kind of had this back and forth going on between specifically Leclerc and Russell. Again, it was exciting, but it is hard to say that these were natural overtakes. I'm sure as teams get used to this, you'll see truer overtakes and not necessarily related to crap, my battery ran out. But once we got past the initial overtakes, it did kind of feel a little bit artificial, I guess is the word. right? But in any case, as the race played out, we got treated to some strategy decisions, right? And the first of the year is trying to figure out, okay, now that we kind of know how overtake and straight mode is working, how does that work into tire deg? How does the energy conservation play into it? And how will this play into the overall strategy, right? So as you start to think about it, you realize that while Mercedes has the fast engine, kind of like we expected, Ferrari also had the pace to fight Mercedes, at least in the opening laps. But I think a strategy call cost them the win. And honestly, I think their drivers also think so, right? So on lap 11, you get Hadjar, who retires because the Ford engine blows up. I honestly don't know. I think that's what ended up happening. It triggered a VSC on lap 11. So both Mercedes pit, right? Ferrari had Leclerc and Hamilton stay out in spite of Hamilton saying, hey, one of us should pit. Either both of us or one of us, don't double stack me, whatever. I'm not saying I need to go in, but we need to do something different, right? We can't all stay out here, right? So Mercedes pit, they come out behind the Ferraris. You had Leclerc leading the race, and then eventually like he would pit and Hamilton would lead the race. Again, Hamilton was the first one saying like, we need one of us to come in. They didn't, right? And essentially after Leclerc pit, Hamilton was in the lead. By lap 28, George Russell had caught up to him. He made his move and he never looked back, right? And honestly, he ended up crossing the line 4 seconds clear of Antonelli. So ultimately, Hamilton's call was the correct one. I was listening on the radio as that happened, but Ferrari defended the call, saying that it wouldn't have mattered if we had pitted or not. Mercedes had the pace regardless. For me, it was a waste of the opportunity of having at least two of their drivers on the podium. I'm not sure they would have won the race, so I agree on that call, but I think for sure they would have been fighting for a 2 and 3 and not a 3 and 4. Again, we can see that it's there, but Ferrari is kind of Ferrari and that strategy. So I guess my question really is, was this a strategic blunder on Ferrari's part, or was Mercedes just literally that much faster than their car? I don't know. Honestly, the car is fast, but I think Ferrari does have the pace to keep up with them. Okay. Either way, Ferrari's going to Ferrari, yo. I don't really know what to say. But in any case, I guess congrats to George Russell for winning and leading the championship. The first time a Mercedes driver and team has done it since 2021. Still too soon to talk about 2021. I'm just going to leave that there. So yeah, let's go through the winners and losers of the Australian GP, because there are some big surprises on both lists, to be completely honest. So first, dessert before veggies, let's go through the winners. The biggest winners obviously are Russell and Mercedes. They delivered a scintillating pace. Russell leads the Drivers' Championship for the first time in his career. It's been a long time coming. Obviously, as he crosses the finish line, he said, I love this engine. I love this car. So yeah, George Russell, 8 years in the league being F1, and he, for the first time ever, has led or is leading a championship. Obviously, that was the move that he was expecting or had been expecting for a long time, because he joined the team and then immediately the ground effects humbled Mercedes, if you will. Antonelli also was a big winner for me. He was able to recover from P7 start, because his start was actually pretty bad. He went from P2 all the way down to P7. Plus, you think about the fact that he was able to come back, start P2 to begin with after that FP3 crash, and ended the race P2 behind Russell on a podium. So again, first time since 21 that Mercedes is leading both the drivers and the constructors championship. Also, shouts out to Max Verstappen. He had a recovery drive that started from 20th and he ended up 6th. He did have a lengthy duel with Norris in the second half, but he was obviously never able to get past Norris. He doesn't seem super comfortable in these cars, but it's Max Verstappen, so frankly, give him time and he'll be back to his old form. Another winner for me was Arvid Lindblad. I really liked it. I really, really liked this kid. I made a video about how he basically put Liam and the F1 world on notice. But basically, At 18 years, 7 months, he became the third youngest scorer in F1 history on his debut. So shouts out to him. He is going to be somebody to watch. I really like this kid. He is quick. And lastly, I think winner, yeah, Behrman and Haas. They had a strong P7 after a chaotic opening weekend. Rumors are obviously that if Behrman continues to outpace, outqualify, outperform his teammate Esteban Ocon, that Jack Doohan will be replacing him in 2027. Those are rumors. But shouts out to those. Of course, the losers. Yeah, Piastri. It is, again, devastating for a home race DNF before he even reached the grid. It's not entirely his fault, but still, that sucks. The Australian GP for Australian drivers continues. Aston Martin and Honda, right? Honda basically blew through one battery per car before the first qualifying sessions. Teams, they're only allocated two for the whole season. So Aston, on top of having a terrible car, have a bunch of penalties incoming. Williams, also a big loser. It's low-key one of my more favorite teams. They are brutally off the pace. And it's very clear that Sainz and Albon are both super, super frustrated. Realistically, I'm expecting more from James Ball. He has elevated the standards at Williams, and I'm holding him to his own standard. I expected more from him. And lastly, I'm going to say Red Bull. Hajar's early retirement squandered a strong grid position. So that's more on Red Bull, or is it more on Ford? Because they were dealing with powertrain issues or PU issues. But yeah, that kind of winners and losers, give or take. Again, still generally speaking, I'm sure everybody will bounce back. A great race overall. But really, the thing I want to talk about is, are the 2026 regulations already broken? You have 3 world champions who are all saying the same thing after this race. These are the worst cars Formula One has ever made. So my question is, are they right? The case against the regulations, you have a bunch of people calling for different things, right? You have Verstappen. He's calling for the FIA to take action. He says, I love racing, but you can only take so much. Honestly, he's not alone. When drivers, fans, and media, a lot of people are calling for changes. You have the current defending champion who basically said, we have gone from the best cars ever made in F1 to probably the worst. I'm going to take that one with a Himalayan sized grain of salt, because Lando has finally tasted victory in the last 2 years of the ground effect regulations. So of course he's going to feel some type of way, because McLaren was nowhere. All right. We're not even going to get into all the drama with Mercedes being the engine manufacturer and all the customer teams feeling like Mercedes was holding back some information, but McLaren was nowhere. I mean, Piastri had some great practices, but he qualified P5, P6. These are the defending constructors champions, right? And then also, like, when you think about super clipping, it makes the cars look broken on TV. Pre-race, obviously, the Piastri incident raised genuine safety concerns, right? That surge of power on cold tires during a reconnaissance lap could potentially lead to more incidents. Of course, on the flip side, you have the case for the regulations. Shocker of all, George Russell says that when drivers have the best cars and the least tire degradation, everyone moans the racing is rubbish. Now drivers aren't happy and everyone is saying that it was an amazing race. Again, take this one with another huge Himalayan sized grain of salt, because Russell is so happy with these cars. Mercedes, for the first time in 4 years, isn't buns. They're doing super well, right? The next case for the regs in a positive way is that we had 7 lead changes in 10 laps, and we haven't seen racing like this in years. Obviously, early on, I said that, were these manufactured overtakes because of the battery depletion, or was this more down to drivers competing? I would say, honestly, it's a little bit of a mix of both. Russell is super quick, and Charles Leclerc is also super quick, but one of his underrated skills is that he is also a great, amazing generational wheel-to-wheel racer. So we did kind of see that battery drama aside. But honestly, Listen, it's round one of 24. The sport is going to adapt and teams will obviously find solutions. This was a learning curve, a steep one. Everybody was going to complain. The FIA, by the way, is already going to be making changes. It's rumored that after the Chinese Grand Prix, they're going to be introducing new regulations, right? So I guess really my question is for you, right? Was the race spectacle worth all the behind the scenes chaos? And honestly, in your opinion, what needs to change and what should stay? Me personally, the first 10 laps, exciting. I haven't seen that many overtakes in years, right? Again, once we got past all of that, we kind of returned to a procession, if you will. So round one is done, and Formula One 2026 already has more drama than some entire seasons. Next up, China sprint weekend. Mercedes needs to be watched closely. Subscribe so you don't miss the breakdown, by the way. And just a quick championship standing again, just to recap. Russell leads. You have Antonelli P2, Leclerc in P3. F1 heads to Shanghai for the first sprint weekend of the 2026 season, which is the Chinese GP, obviously. It's going to be interesting. Will Mercedes continue their dominance? Will Ferrari do even better than they did last weekend? Of course, the only sprint win of the Ferrari team came last year with Lewis Hamilton. Again, if you watch this podcast any, you know I don't really care for sprints, but here we are. So yeah, that's pretty much it. As always, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Tell your mommies, your papis, your tios, abuelas, vecinos, that's neighbors if you don't speak Spanish, for the Monoplaza F1 podcast. I'm Emi Beltre. Peace.